So, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to talk about how to build a comprehensive JD Edwards DR solution. And what we're trying to, I got an error there. What we're going to try to really understand here is the journey. So when you ask yourself, is your JD Edwards imperative to your business? The answer is absolutely. And you have to ask yourself, quite honestly, can you recover your JD Edwards successfully if you were to have a disaster? How does that affect your business? And what we partnered here with Carolina Biological Supply is their journey and how they took a look at their capabilities today, their weaknesses, their risk profile, and how they, most importantly, aligned with their business so they can demonstrate a successful DR roadmap. We're going to show everybody how this isn't about just having insurance, but rather a solution that can help protect the very business, the engine room of their company. So thank you again for joining us, and I'm going to introduce our team. So first of all, my colleague here from Carolina Bio, Mr. Tony Price.
Oh, good afternoon or good morning. Of course, here in North Carolina, it's afternoon. I am Tony Price. I am the Director of Technology here at Carolina Biological. As I look down the list, 39 years of tech industry experience. That means I'm old. 20 years of JDE, and that probably made me older. I do love Quest, though. I don't know that anybody can miss the in-person conferences more than I do, but I miss them. But at least we have this forum in the interim until we can get back together. My IT career has always been as a developer. And I think that kind of plays a little bit into the part of our story here as we get more into it. And of course, the things that just make me up. I'm a man of faith, and I am a cancer survivor. And just if anybody's looking over there at that marathon medal there from Disney World, that's not me. I might have done the 5K there, but our CNC guy is the marathoner. So that's just a little bit about me.
You know what? Give yourself some credit. Tony goes to this event every year and walks the walk. He speaks it, and most importantly, he is a cancer survivor, and he did ring the bell. And we can't say anything more than good for you, Tony.
Thank you.
A little bit about myself. I'm Richard Zaleski, and 30 years in the field of IT. So I too have vested a lot of years of my experience. I'm a subject matter expert specializing in business resiliency, cloud architecture design, and I've had a lot of experience supporting computer room and FEMA-related disasters. So we're going to share our experience here. This isn't just about our credentials, but rather experience is the best thing, and we all are a part of Quest because we network and we believe in the conference and what it stands for, and that is sharing information and really helping the colleague that sits on our right or sits on the left, even though it's virtual. We are colleagues. We all have the same purpose, and that is to gain the benefits of JD Edwards. So we're going to show you some of these things from both our experiences. I am a published author, and most importantly, like all, I'm a frustrated golfer. And that probably is never going to change.
Okay, well, I'll start just telling you a little bit about Carolina Biological, if you don't know. The only real importance on that sign there is there at the bottom. If you can read it, it says serving education since 1927. And as Richard advances, if you're thinking, wow, they're serving education, and this year must have been pretty tough for Carolina Biological, and certainly, as I say that, we certainly realize in having a tough year. But our primary business is there, in the second bullet is to provide teaching materials to science educators. Traditionally, that's been in the classroom, and as you can imagine. This year is the mass exodus from the classroom, not only in, all the way from kindergarten through, colleges. There was, in just a matter of a couple of weeks, the halls were empty, and certainly for us, greatly affected us. And you can see, as I've kind of got the little bit about the size of our company there. Um, right now, we're running a little under 400 employees. We hope to get back around that 500 mark. We have about 17 right now in IS. Hope to gain a few back that we've lost this past year. That obviously I've talked about that we ship to schools, universities, a few nature centers, and a little bit in the private sector, but primarily our business has been middle and high school. Of course, that's changing. If our last bullet there is, as Richard is showing, our diverse set of products is online science. You can imagine how that exploded this year when traditional science wasn't available. We began a program about 6-8 years ago that we partner with online colleges to send science materials directly to the home of the student. Fortunately for Carolina, we had that business up and going, and we knew how to do it. And all of a sudden, every college became an online science college. So that really, I think, saved us for last year. But all of these products here on this page, from living animals to models to microorganisms, all can be now boxed up and sent directly to a student's home.
Yeah, all very important.
Right, exactly. And that's, we don't, certainly, as I'm sure all of your companies are saying now, not sure what we're going to look like when we finally get to the end of this. And we don't either, but I think it's been very beneficial to our company to survive and learn, and we're looking forward to that next chapter in Carolina for sure.
Well, you guys are doing great things, and educating our children is the most important thing we can possibly do. So we look at technology and JD Edwards, our data centers, it's the very heart of our company. And we sort of played on the words, the DNA, but we know that JD Edwards and our data center plays a very active role so that we can achieve business outcomes. Today's consumer is always connected. Everyone in our supply chain, they expect our brands to be continually available and to always be secure. So when you consider the influence of JD Edwards, it affects a larger set of business outcomes, I beg your pardon. So our systems of record is the JD Edwards. That's where the transactions happen in our financial systems, our payroll systems, and everything interfaces into this thing called the cloud. So as I mentioned, we are always connected. Our iPhones, our iPads, our supply chain, ordering systems are all handled through automation, and these systems of engagement have to be up and running. They have to be secure. So whether you call it private cloud or a software-defined data center, JD Edwards plays a very significant role on connecting these systems of engagement with the systems of record, the transaction that we all know as JD Edwards. And we consider that to be the very lifeblood of our company here. So as we start to go forward, we're going to talk about disaster recovery and why do we need it? Well, obviously this guy in the harbor, he needs an insurance policy, probably more so than DR. But, we look at the exceptions, and there is no business that's immune from a disaster or an extended outage. Too often, we're too small to have a DR plan. We're too small to have a DR solution. And the reality is we all have to demonstrate some level of diligence, compliance, and we do this, why? To protect our data. Our data is the greatest asset of our corporation, and it provides competitive standing. If we do not protect our data is not available or is compromised in any way, we cannot conduct any form of business. And most importantly, we cannot tell our customers and supply chain that we can securely manage their data. So a definition of a disaster by textbook, a disaster is a sudden unplanned event that causes great damage or loss to your organization. But remember that it's the time factor that determines whether it's an interruption in service or an inconvenience to the business, or worse, a disaster. So if I walk into the data center and I lean up against the power switch and accidentally hit the kill switch, the data center is down, my business is down, but that is a interruption in service or an incident. It is not a disaster. Now, if I can't bring the data center back up after that, then obviously that's a disaster and would probably be not all that good for my career either. So when we look at disaster, one of the things that I want everyone to take away is that don't get caught up in having a DR solution for a hurricane versus a tornado versus a flood versus a power outage versus whatever the incident level. A disaster is anything that stops your business from functioning and cannot be corrected within an acceptable amount of time to the business. I want you to remember that, to the business, not to IT, because the business drives the end. Business drives the revenue, and IT is a utility that is produced. So when we look at, here's an example of a sudden unplanned event, data center down. So when we look at any situation, whether the lights are out, this whole mantra that if we cannot provide JD Edwards transactional capabilities and our users cannot sign on and do whatever they do to move product within our organization, that is a disaster. And then how we react is what we're going to learn about today. So here's a wonderful picture of Mr. Tony Price. Take it away, Tony.
I'm just a little heavier than that, but anyway, we do like the hat. Certainly, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, I was mainly on the development side, and for most of my career, and that changed here in around 2011. And I had to smile as Richard was talking there about leaning up against the switch. We actually had that happen just right before I took over the infrastructure side of IT here at Carolina, and we quickly put a big plastic cover over the button, but it really does happen. So anyway, I got a new job, thrown into the fire, as you would say. I still today say I'm playing catch up on networking, security, backplanes. I've learned so much in the last 10 years, and I'm so thankful, that I have. But for a while, I was barely treading water, and so I inherited a job that we had a DR. We talked about DR. Really, my involvement was probably smirking at the fact that we weren't ever successful. So, luckily, I had to learn very quickly. Just a little bit back, just a little snapshot of that 2011 time. We were IBM DB2. We're still on an I series. Windows Citrix. At that point in time, it was JD 811. We did have a staff that was, dedicated to making this DR work at a facility just down the road in Atlanta. We tried to test annually. It was not successful. But our plan was we sent tapes off site daily, and the best, of course, we could ever hope for was an RTO of 48 hours and an RPO of 24. But the reality was quite different than what we had. So we, as I started in this area, we had an assessment. We got a report card from our previous test, and we failed horribly. We found it's amazing how quickly you find out that your backup is incomplete. until you try to restore something bare metal. And we just could not make, JDE work when we were able to restore our systems. Every fix we threw at it just cost more dollars, more time. And I was definitely feeling the pressure of what can I do? Is there a way that I can find success? And fortunately, as we continue with the story, I think you'll see that we have.
Yeah, one of the big things that when backup policies, nobody really knows until they test them. And, I'll have people tell me at conferences, and they say, well, Richard, I just restored a file. I was able to get back that AP report. I was able to get something back from payroll. So actually, I think our backups are complete. But until you actually have to recover the system back to Wednesday, bare metal, and bring back JD Edwards to the proper working order, you will unfortunately more than likely discover that your backup policies are indeed not complete.
Yeah, definitely. As Richard was talking about, just being able to restore a file, just ask accounting what would happen if you lose 5 hours out of the GL and see what they say.
Yeah, or payroll if we can't pay our employees. So one of the things that, many people, customers, Tony included, found out that when you're working with a subscription service, the disasters will also affect the entire supply chain. And you have to really consider when you go with a large commercial operator per se, that is your regional FEMA related disaster affecting others, and more importantly, your solution provider. Do you understand the commitment? What is the SLA? What is the subscription ratio? One of the things that was alarming to Carolina Bio was the ratio of 110 customers assigned to the same set of hardware in Atlanta, Georgia. And then at the end of the day, you have to consider, can you travel in a disaster? And then when you get there, are there declaration fees, usage fees? There's so much that's not even in a fine print, that's in one of those schedules in page 37 of the contract, that you really don't know until you've come up against a situation. So we highly recommend you take a look at what is the rest of the story per se. So now, the journey begins for Tony as he really realizes he's been a frustrated DR guy, and that's really where our paths crossed with that famous DR book, if I recall.
Yes, and as I was talking about wallowing in my misery of trying to find a way to tread water in this infrastructure world, what better way than to go to Charleston, South Carolina, and attend a regional JDE conference? And while I was there, Richard was one of the speakers for a breakout session, and boy, it really opened my eyes. I had never even thought or heard about a managed DR solution. I really didn't know what the terms RTO and RPO, meant to my business, much less how I could even, pass that along to our management, and so, I actually, won Richard's book. I've always told him I'd probably bought it if I didn't win it, but I don't know if that's true or not. But anyway, I did buy it, and I did win it, and I did read it. So it was very impactful to me, as certainly as my journey began really with that JD conference there. Was able to take that and really, I was able then to talk, intelligently to our executives. And it wasn't just about, could I go find that tape in that vault somewhere here in North Carolina and get it restored, but we could talk about the impact of the number of hours of data that we might lose. And I could intelligently talk about RTO and RPO. And so it was a really eye-opening and a great turnaround in our DR journey.
Yeah, so one of the things that we emphasize in this seminar, and thank you, Tony, for reading my book. I didn't intend to, actually, I thought the book would put Tony to sleep, and instead it kept him up at night. So we decided to get their J.D. Edwards into recovery shape. And you look at Tony now, he was a skeleton of himself a few slides earlier, very anorexic, where now he's taking charge here. And so what does that mean, getting into recovery shape? So it starts with the backups, because the backups are the backbone in any recovery. If it's not on a tape or not in some kind of secured technology, then it's just not recoverable. And too often when we get involved with customers who've had a disaster, and we've supported numerous disasters in our operation, there's excessive time wasted by trying to get pieces from a weekly save, a monthly save, even worst case, downloading software. Imagine going to the Oracle website and downloading JD Edwards, which would be really a travesty. So we find a lot of system level components are missing. And that is the part where, as people say, that my backups do work because I can recover a file. But as I share here, there's a lot of things. Have you kept up with the JD Edwards changes? You've been encouraged to, through these seminars to go to, the latest version of JD Edwards, 925. Maybe you came from World, you went to E1. Well, the backup policies change, and have to be very specific to the prototype environments that are associated with JD Edwards. Have you expanded into this thing on the iSeries called the IFS? Do you know where World lives, or sorry, E1 lives inside of that? And then your third-party products, because all of this has to be linked to a common backup policy to be successful. And when I move this thing forward, before we actually do the test, it's amazing how a little bit of remediation, a little bit of best practice can help you significantly, and I mean significantly, be successful in your very first test. And there's something that I call the MATE program, where you mate the operations, the applications, and servers to an application profile and a protection group. And by doing that, you could take your third-party BI, orchestrator, you could take all of these functions and group them together so that regardless of the platform that they are part of, they can be replicated or backed up and presented to have a complete working JD Edwards solution. So seriously, one takeaway, please, audit your backups. I never say audit. Assess your backups so that they are complete to meet the needs of your organization. Tony?
Yeah, definitely. So as obviously we jumped ahead in the program a little bit there, as certainly we had some time of negotiations between our companies and some selling to our executives to begin our managed DR journey. And obviously we started, and in just 4 short months, we did have a successful, 100% successful restoration of JD Edwards. First one that I ever remembered, at the company. And it was a great start. I called it small steps. Obviously, that we got our bonuses. I think they've offered them when they thought we couldn't do it. And we had a DR. We probably called it a DR plan, but we really didn't have a great plan. We still had gaps, obviously. Starting out with the RPO of 24 hours and the RTO of 48, successful as it was, and then that was great in itself. But there was certainly still a ways to go to get us to where we really need to be.
Yeah, so one of the things that I'll never forget was, we're partners, obviously, and when you meet the president or a CEO of a company and he says, just so you know, the bonuses of the entire IT staff are dependent on you guys being successful in the next 4 months. Nothing can be higher a pressure. And maybe, as Tony said, it's because it hadn't been done for 4 straight years. But, again, through an SLA, we committed to it and we definitely moved the business forward. But as Tony says, that's not everything. And one of the things you have to consider is healthy DR plan, healthy business. And you have to have a set of procedures that are highly actionable. And these actionable procedures are called the disaster recovery plan. And this is your IT, your planned IT response to this sudden unplanned event. And how do you get the business moving, and how do you bring back all of those mission critical applications? And that goes well beyond JD Edwards, of course. You may have a timekeeping application, you may have payroll running on, maybe not even on JD Edwards. So how do you bring back all the application server infrastructure, and most important, the network? So as you build a disaster recovery plan, you want it to be part of your ongoing process, because when you first get a disaster recovery plan, it's a project. And there's a lot of steps, a lot of documentation. Everyone loves documenting. I know you do, just have to admit it. But the reality is we don't, and we get sloppy at it. So we have to build automation to grab some of these documentation pieces and build that set of procedures. And this isn't to impress our CEO of our organization that we have a leather-bound copy of our DR plan, but rather something that is highly executable, and that all the people in the DR plan, if your name's in it, you have a copy of the DR plan, actually know what's expected, their roles, responsibilities, and actions. And once you put together a process, you plan, you implement, you test. And this goes constantly through an ongoing evolution, so it doesn't become a project all over again. In the disciplines that I always have, every page of your DR plan should answer who, what, why, where, when, how. Who's going to do it, where you're going to do it, what functions, how do you resume this, how do you start that, what are all the operational things that have to happen? Because we have spent years building our data center and our JD Edwards practice, and we're going to have to recover it in the next few hours, in the next couple of days. So that's a lot of pressure. And I always say that if our DR plan has a page that said this has been left intentionally blank, then it's probably an Oracle manual, not a DR plan. Every page should answer with certainty who, what, why, where, when, how. Then you'll be successful. But to be successful, you have to consider change control, because one of the things that we always find in any JD Edwards environment is that, where did this server come from? I didn't know we had this application. I don't have a key for it. I don't have a license. So if you incorporate DR and backups into your change control practice, so when you add a new server, you will build the backup policy, build the security policy, build the elements in the DR plan for it, and obviously notify your managing partner that there is a new server that needs to be added into disaster recovery scope. So cannot stress enough that change control is a very important part of your success.
That's something that we learned very quickly, as being that developer most of my life. That change control was certainly about putting in new code, and we quickly learned that. And I think it's ingrained in ourselves now, is when we do maybe make an operating system change on the iSeries or Windows, or as Richard said, a new server or remove a server. We can't. I think for the first few years as we started this, it didn't come second nature to, okay, we've got to make this change in our DR plan. But I think it is second nature now that we think of that first now once we start making a change.
Lessons learned, lessons learned. So top reasons plans fail is because they're not updated on a regular basis. And going back to Tony's comments, if it's part of change control, you're going to update it versus wait for that once a year event where y'all go into a boardroom and read 300 pages of a novel that really doesn't interest you. Many plans are just not complete. So at the end of the day, if we don't protect our infrastructure, we don't have the proper backups, we don't have the proper redundancy, we're going to fail. Can't stress enough, crisis communications. How are you going to communicate with your IT team? How are you going to communicate with your business? How are you going to communicate with your supply chain? So this starts to become part of business continuity, but you have to remember that you have to have a line of communication that on the hour you will update your business. On the hour they'll update their supply chain. Silence is not golden in a disaster. I can't stress that enough. And be realistic. I've written a lot of plans. I've assessed a lot of plans for customers throughout North America. And sometimes, you'll see 2 people on a staff and they've got 300 servers to recover. And, you ask them and you go, Don, how are you going to possibly recover 300 yourself? He goes, well, I have no chance. But you've signed off on this. So you have to be realistic and you have to be forthcoming to the business, because you are protecting the very livelihood of everybody that works in your organization. So, uptime, you start to realize that uptime is very important. We've all talked about 724. Well, it's here. As we said, we're always connected, always on, always want to create a transaction. And we never want to have a consumer walk away from our product, no matter what the circumstance may be. So we need to look at how do we protect the data and stay current, and how do we protect the data and make it available all the time.
So just now, just a little bit of a snapshot of our JDE system. I think we're probably similar to a lot of you listening this afternoon, this morning. But as a small shop, we really rely on partners and tools, and we've been very fortunate. We are on 9.2. Our tools were 9.241, and very thankful to get there. We're, as we've said before, we're an I-Series Power 9, but we use the things you do. We use some Premier Group as one of our partners for order entry, e-commerce, credit card. We bottom line for our forms. We use ProShip for our freight, our Smart for our warehousing. We use OBIEE. We still call it Spreadsheet Server, but it's obviously part of Insight software now. We use ARC tools. And of course, we use Denovo for our DR. And the reason I wanted this slide was, we can't run our business without all of this working. And so the main part of being able to restore J.D. Edwards is, I think Richard actually mentioned earlier, is to be able to make the whole thing work. And certainly as we move forward to just the basic servers other than the I-Series that we need to restore together. So this is what we have at Denovo. They will restore our I-Series, but this group of servers that we have determined that we need to run our business. And that's what it's about. It's being able to take an order, be able to pick it, pack it, ship it, invoice it. And if we can do that, we're going to survive until we can get past whatever that disaster was.
Yeah, fair enough. And that's, I can't stress enough, it's everything in your data center that is considered a tier 1 application that is required by your business users to conduct their line of business. Making exceptions has bottom line revenue impact. So as we evolved with Carolina Biological Supply, as you heard earlier, they were a tape recovery solution with an RPO, recovery point objective, of 24 hours. And when you think about that, in today's world, that is no longer acceptable, because could you imagine going to your business and tell them that every transaction that they do today will be lost? And they say, well, wait a second, Tony, I thought you back up the system. Well, we do. We back it up every night at 2 o'clock in the morning, and we get a great picture of J.D. Edwards, and that's what we restore the files from. They go, well, if you back it up, how come we're losing all this data? So a lot of business leaders don't understand RPO and RTO. Your job as a IT expert is to educate your business on what IT can deliver. And we learned by talking to the business that they really need to protect their transactions. So we've implemented over time an availability solution for Carolina Biological Supply where we protect their data. So we can protect it right back to the last successful J.D. Edwards transaction. That applies to both the SQL databases and DB2 as it runs on IBM I-Series. Protecting the data and failing over to a DR solution is paramount to the success of their business. Having not to go back and trying to redo a transaction, reship a truck, reproduce some part of their business is something that is no longer acceptable in today's architecture. Another view of this availability solution is we've taken the truck out of play. So they have an iSeries, as you mentioned, but we also have a lot of VMs and multiple databases. And one of the things you have to consider when you pick a partner is geographic separation. Our data center facilities in our private cloud are in FEMA Region 8, which is the safest FEMA region in the United States continental. Too often I've been involved in FEMA-related events where the primary data centers in Florida and the alternates in North or South Carolina, and those hurricane tracks are obviously obvious. The idea here is you do not need a New York data center and a Los Angeles solution. You don't need to have 3,000 miles of geographic separation, but rather take a look at where common FEMA events would affect you and what is the safest place. Because if you can take the data transport out of the region where your data center is, you'll be so much further ahead. So, but going further is, why is uptime very important? Well, today we know, as I've said, our business is 100% reliant on technology. And if you're not up and running, you're going to have lost customers, lost productivity. When you have an entire warehouse that's sitting idle with hundreds of workers waiting for the systems to come online so that you can ship product and distribute, look at the impact. Imagine not having an Amazon warehouse fully online for 24 hours a day, what that would do to your supply chain. It would be just magnificent, the impact when it's all said and done. The expenses cannot be clawed back. So the whole thing here is we want to make sure you're always open 7/24.
Yeah, it's interesting that as Richard was talking, it just kind of took me back to the early 2000s when I began to work here at Carolina Biological, and probably most of the departments, whether it was our customer communication group, they had a way to take a manual order, or they could there was paperwork out in the warehouse that they could go and pick parts and pieces and a way to manually ship. But those things are well in the past. As Richard was talking now, our business, if you want to see, our shipping manager squirm and just tell him how he has to recreate the last 6 hours of his day, that's just not reality anymore. And I actually use that kind of argument a little bit, even when I'm talking about our cybersecurity. We can't afford for our systems to be down and not recoverable. And so it's certainly been a great success that we've been able to take, this DR plan. And Richard talked a little bit about the word insurance, and certainly some people look at it as that, but that is part of our business. If we went out into this world tomorrow and decided we didn't need it, and then had that disaster, it could cause not only whatever the disaster was, but a business disaster that might take years to recover from.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is where the alignment is very important. So Tony presented a means of not just selling it or upselling it within his organization, but actually sharing what he can do or what the impact would be. Many times where I've been involved in disasters, we feel pretty good that we actually recovered the system, and the IT and the business are very, very disappointed with the IT team and their business partners because we did not meet their needs. Could you imagine, being down for an extended period of time and being happy with that because IT did their job, but we didn't serve the business and what it needs? So one of the things I recommend when you're writing your DR plan or interfacing with your business continuity teams is demonstrate and tell them what we're going to do with our solution. Because you might have signed off that, hey, a tape-based solution or a VTL, if it isn't tape, and 24-hour RPO is acceptable. Well, the head of logistics or warehousing might say, wait a second, if we go back a day, we're going to lose every transaction in the warehouse. We have automated facilities. We may not be able to restart these warehouses without doing an inventory count. which could justify a higher level of systems availability. Not necessarily high availability, but rather a data protection or a vaulting solution. Or sometimes it's the time. Well, we could definitely recover, but it's going to take 2 days. By the time we drive somewhere, ship the tapes, ship the VTL, download from the cloud. Be careful with some of these backup to cloud options. Do not have the bandwidth to support the large size of your JD Edwards. And they say, wait a second, I can't afford to wait 24 hours. It's got to be 12 or less, or we will be fined by our supply chain. So take all of these things into consideration, because you're trying to give your IT department an A plus. We want our kids to get an A plus in geometry and all those things. And in university, we see it's all about our GPA. But this is important about the business agility, because the business depends on every one of you on this webinar. And the architecture, the end state, all are needed. And we have to have the ability to make sure that the infrastructure and the availability and resiliency works the exact same way it does in production today, with not less horsepower, but more. And this all has to be with quantifiable, quantifiable metrics. So everything's got to be measurable and quantifiable by the fact that if you can demonstrate a successful level of resiliency and application availability, your business will buy into this. Lastly, here is an example of what Tony has become. As time gone on, you saw an anorexic version, the DR guy, and he has proceeded to being in recovery shape. And obviously, Tony has realized his solution is complete and reliable, and he's laying back a little bit more than normal. So.
Oh no, but it's as I was looking ahead toward this slide here, practice, and we have a lot of stories. I'm sure we all can tell during this pandemic year, but we didn't stop with our DR test. We had one in June of last year, and just real quickly, we have a primary site and we have a DR site. So there was 4 of us gathered at our DR site, ready to swing our network over to the Denovo facility once we declared the disaster. And as we all sat around, we were solely focused on our DR test. And in walks one of our executives, and we were sitting a little too close. We forgot we were in a pandemic. We were focusing on our disaster, and we kind of got our hands slapped a little bit, and we spread apart a little bit. But I guess it makes for a little bit more of an interesting story for a DR test. But because it was boring, it worked. We successfully swung our network. We successfully found our up-to-the-minute data in JD Edwards, our VMs that were needed, and so even in this past year, we didn't stop testing.
Yeah, no, I agree. Testing makes perfect, and your IT and executives rely on that. So I think you always have to prove to yourself, your IT and ERP professionals, as well as the business, that you're getting the value and that this works. Our sponsors are our executives, and we have to continue to have their buy-in, and they have to know that the vision that Tony had in building a DR plan, partnering, and having an effective DR solution aligns with their needs. And more importantly, that this is not magic. This is something that is repeatable. And the repeatable portion of this is something that, has to happen. Tony had learned the hard way doing it manually, and maybe, in fun, we're all talking about how he got lazy during the pandemic, but he still practices, and we still practice, because it's very important to our end game here. So why does IT not test more frequently? Well, too often it becomes your responsibility, and you say, well, not much has changed, so why do I need to do another test? I've been on 9.2 for a while. We just did a tools update. That should be good enough. We still back it up. It's a pandemic. But the reality is your staff has to be trained on their responsibility and their commitment back up to the business executives. We always have a lot of competing projects. Let's get real. We wear our hat and we have to do a lot of things for our organization. So that's another reason a lot of companies will employ and engage a managed service provider here that specializes in application level recovery specific to JD Edwards. And he can rest easy, but in a partnership, all the user acceptance testing is still a very important thing that Tony has documented, because he cannot hand over the applications to his business knowing that the applications are less than ideal in their working order. So we know that JD Edwards is very complex. Do not underestimate it. And when you sell upwards within your organization, this isn't turn it on and it works. You are trying to rebuild, restore, fail over an active JD Edwards environment, which is the engine room of your company, in very little time for something that took years to build. And all these regular audit switchover tests demonstrate with compliance and certainty that this thing will work at time of need when you actually need it. So having these tests done for you isn't the answer. It's to do it in partnership and understand that it's costly to your business if you don't protect your data and really reserve the amount of downtime.
So I think
it's a little bit of a report card
of exactly. This is our just a snapshot of our journey, that we began 10 years ago. And I used the term, I think, small steps there at one point in time. And although now I can look back and say that first successful recovery of JDE was a small step, but in reality, it was a huge step for Caroline Biological. And we were just able to build on that. We had to start somewhere. We started from failure, and I think we've, with our partnership with Denovo, we've really created something that we can rely on, and we can repeat, and we can prove that we can restore our systems even up to the last transaction that passed. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And you don't have to fail to make a change. And what I mean by that is failure obviously puts some urgency because you're at risk. But I have a lot of when I speak at conferences, people say, "Well, we haven't failed a DR test, so it's good enough." And you hear these ads on TV, "Good enough," and the answer is good enough of yesterday, good enough for today. Our business has evolved. Stock valuation. We all know what happens when we don't hit the numbers. Our 401k goes downstream when our stock that we invested in, they didn't meet their numbers. This is about having uptime and building business and preserving the integrity and value of that brand that your company has and that shelf space that it represents. So good enough might have made sense 4 or 5 years ago, but today you have to evolve and you need to evolve. And that evolution is generally past tape and VTL into a vaulting solution, which is where we went in the middle. Then ultimately we went to a fully leveraged, close to high availability solution. You have to see where you fit, and that really comes down to your counterparts and your executives and what they need, and don't have them assume that IT has it under control, and IT should not assume that that is good enough for the business. So, what we thought we'd step back is just a little bit of what, Tony felt was important and what we agreed to through our solution. And the biggest thing here is things like JD Edwards and complementary application functionality. I can't tell you the number of DRs that I've been involved in, and I've audited and assessed other solutions and providers where if you can ping it, you could use it, and there couldn't be anything farther from the truth. JD Edwards is a very complex, highly integrated application. It's fantastic. It runs our business. But to make it available in a disaster, failing over with certainty, making sure database integrity is there is something that you have to make sure your provider has the expertise. No declaration fees. It's amazing how you have a disaster and you have to pay $8,000, $10,000, $15,000 for the right to declare a disaster. And then because they're so overly subscribed, where you think you're going to Atlanta, you're now heading to Phoenix, Arizona. Take a look at what happens when you have an event. How long can you stay at that provider? We give everybody 30 days minimum of access, and that's important because many of the disasters we fail over and we're back in a week or 2 weeks because there was a power glitch, the generator didn't come on. But if you were to lose your data center, you're not going to be up and running in any short time. So being able to stay and being functional, operationally functional at your target's location is very key. And make sure that the architecture and performance profile is equal to or greater than it is back at your place. But, a little bit further, we talk about IT disasters, but, I speak a lot about this, and that is the Home Emergency Preparedness Plan. If you have a FEMA event, you have 2 CEOs in your life that you have to respond to. Your spouse is going to be saying, please come home, our basement's underwater, the kids are scared, we need to get medicine over to grandma's house. And then you're going to have your corporate CEO says, you got to come in, you got to fail over or restore our business because we're counting on you. And you have to face the old unfortunate situation of making a choice, protecting your family, a divorce, or being fired. And it's all about being prepared from both an IT perspective and family perspective. And I teach a lot of this because you should know what to do if you had to evacuate. How do you move? We were involved in a lot of the fires in California last year, and it is disheartening when people got to leave their house and their pictures and everything behind, and they've got 35 minutes to get in their car and drive and be escorted by California fire down roads that are filled with flames on both sides of the canyon or whatever the case may be. Know what to do, how to do it, and how to manage it. Because at the end of the day, we know that not all heroes wear capes. We're not all Supermen, but most of us are dad and mom. And we and our kids and families rely on us just as much as our business relies on IT. So being prepared and being able to protect your family and make your family resilient in any situation is paramount to success. Let's just go here. So, Tony's journey as he worked with his executives really was from a restore and recover solution. But as the digital world and that 24/7 expectation continues, we now are into resume and make your JD Edwards highly available. And that's a big difference. That evolution has spanned really, really dramatically fast in the last 5 years. And the need to make sure it works with all the servers that are in scope and within the capabilities to drive the business quickly and adequately are all about resumption of service. When are we going to be up? In the next 10 minutes. How are we going to be up? The same way we were before the event, which is a lot different than being dark and watching the old clock spin, which is called the RTO, until the time was needed. As I said, ask your executives and say, what would you do if the systems were unavailable for 8 hours, 24 hours, 48 hours, etc. So last but not least, look at Tony, Superman here. And this isn't about being Superman. This is about following compliance, following what we know are industry best practices. So when you engage and go on this journey, be bold, buyer beware. If it's cheap, there's a reason it's cheap. Compare what your role is and what your provider is going to do. Own the data. Can't stress that enough. Loss of data means lost business. Being out of business is something that has been proven by the U.S. Bureau of Labor that companies that have had a significant data loss go out of business within 5 years. Look to leaders in DR space. Understand, go to seminars. Disaster Recovery Journal is a wonderful outfit for understanding the disaster recovery industry and business continuity. And you know what? Demand exceptional service. You should ensure that what you subscribe to through contract in your partnership meets every one of your needs today and tomorrow. So I guess we can wrap it up with, there we go. Seems like my screen is frozen. For questions and answers, or anything else you'd like to add, Tony?
No, I think we've covered a lot. I do see that we have a couple of questions there in the chat, and since I think they had my name in them, I'll real quickly answer those real quick. And one was, what advice would I have for my counterparts that are considering DR solutions? And I think for me it was, the being able to look at myself and understand that this was a weakness for me, and certainly not something that any of us do every day. So I think we really need to look at the leaders in the space. And I was very fortunate that I found, not only a partner, but I found a friend that would help me in my journey. And, I think just building those relationships and learn. It was so funny that I used to just think, well, you just put in the tape and restore the files, and it works. And certainly we know, all of us that are in JD Edwards, it takes a lot to get that thing to work, sometimes every morning. So I think you just have to say, well, I can't do this all by myself. And a lot of us in this JD Edwards space are in small companies, and we need our partners and we need our friends. And I think the last question I see that was for me was, what is the hesitation from executives, that might not share, or at least my passion for needing to be able to get these systems up and going. And I think it's really to get them to understand that it's not the systems that we need to get up and going, it's the business we need to get up and going. Of course, there's always that little bit of hesitancy of, well, we could spend the money and re-landscape the campus, or, paint the building, or every company has lots and lots of things they can spend their dollars on. But will any of those things allow me to take an order, to pick, pack, and ship it and get our money? And I think if they can understand that, and certainly I'm not selling our executives short at all, because they do understand that. And they all have tough jobs of where to spend those dollars. But I think that was always part of my job, was to help make them understand that it wasn't just a system, it was our business.
Yeah, I think that's a key word. This is your business. IT, it's built differently, consumed differently than ever before. And really, technology and business, we're inseparable. We drive the business drives us, and we all have the same goal. And the outcome is uptime, availability, and protecting our greatest asset, the data, and ensuring our business is viable and successful at all times. And
Right,
looks
well,
like
I would like to say a quick thank you to both Richard and Tony. We appreciate your time today and appreciate your willingness to answer the questions that came through. And we would appreciate seeing everybody at Denovo's next session at In Focus and Vision, which is at 3:15 today. How Heinz Interest moved to the cloud their way. Richard and Tony, thank you once again for a great presentation.
Well, thank you, everybody, for attending. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, team, and everybody. Stay safe and have a great day. Ciao.